Facebook, Google. It's amazing. We've got some really cool stuff, 3D stuff, lots of jQuery, lots of JavaScript, lots of front end, lots of awesome things. So, actually, what's full screen? Anybody? Quickly? Command Shift up. Ah, cool. So I'm here to talk about documenting interfaces. I'm actually doing this talk at jQuery TO, but it's going to be a little bit bigger. This was only like a 10-minute presentation. I have 10 minutes, right? 15? Okay, awesome. So, is this on? No. There we go. Okay, I like giving away free stuff. As the Humber College students know that are here, I see you. You guys can't answer this next question because I asked it at a talk I just did at their at the college the other day. But I have a free GitHub t-shirt to give away. I think it's a medium. I also have a ton of stickers that everybody can just run up and get. There's like Iron Man, I think. There's like Polar Mobile. There's a ton. There's Wolverine. Anybody? Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Darcy.
Sweet, no problem. So, yeah, quick question. I'd like to always give away free stuff because it's, I don't know, it's fun. So what's the default positioning of an element?
Static.
Yeah, bro. Not a lot of people know that because they're always dealing with relative or absolute positioning. Yeah. If you don't want, you can give it away. Make some friends. How many people have actually met me before or know who I am? Couple? Okay, sweet. Anybody? So who hasn't met me or know who I am? Sweet! We're going to become friends. So you guys are all following me. Right? It's at Darcy, just my first name. Pretty cool. I got friends at Twitter. Yeah, what is documentation? This is going to be light again. You have to pay for the big show. But what's documentation? To me, it's about communication. It's about telling a story. It's about documenting something that's happened, events. Does anybody know what this is? Do you know, Lane?
Dead Sea Scrolls?
Yeah. Maybe. I don't know, actually.
Wrong language.
I don't know.
Wrong language.
Wrong language? It's cuneiform. It's cuneiform. Have you guys heard of cuneiform? So basically, this is one of the oldest documented sort of languages or documentation. It's about 3,000 years old. It's one of the oldest. I've tried to find the oldest documents. And I think that there was over 1,000 different pictograms in this language. So they literally were documenting everything. If you think about the characters we use to formulate the language we do now with, what, how many letters in the alphabet? 26? Okay, awesome. So we sort of evolved our language and the way that we documented things over time. You can tell we went to scrolls, we were drawing on rocks, and then we had books, and then we had pictures, and then we had cats looking at laptops. And it's gotten so crazy now that we also have cats looking at cats on iPads. So yeah, it's like Catception. I bet you're thinking right now, whoa, alien documentation. Who watches the History Channel? No? Anybody? Do you ever watch Ancient Aliens? These guys are amazing. Okay. Small subset. This is an inside joke. So I'm going to get a little bit out there, but I like to think about time a lot. The past, the present, and the future. Lately I've been liking to think about modes that I'm in. I think there's two modes that you get in, and one is creation, the other is consumption. So when I'm creating something, I'm not consuming, I'm just generating it. It's kind of like an energy thing. I'm not like super hippie, but like I kind of look at it that way. When I'm creating something, I'm not consuming. When I'm consuming, I'm not creating. So I'm very aware of when I'm in one or the other. When you put these two things together, time and these modes, you seem to think that every time as a designer, as a UX developer, you're constantly, when you're creating, thinking about the future, how somebody's going to use your piece of work or how it's going to be perceived. And then when you're consuming, you're looking at something that's already been built, it's in the past, right? So if I'm reading a book or reading documentation, it was already created, it's sort of in the past. And then if you're in the present, we're always in the present. I don't know, you're just out to lunch. So, but the future can be dangerous. if you are constantly creating and not looking and reflecting on what you've done, and not documenting what you've done, this can become a dangerous cycle. And you know, if you get hit by a bus, the old theory, developers get hit by a bus and the project goes to hell because nobody else knows how to write the code because it's not documented. So I want to talk about UI. Oh, here we go. It's also very important to document because, you know, you got to be very. Everybody read that? It's the cutest kid I've ever seen. Right? This is why documentation is important, to tell you why students don't actually sound like airplanes. So there's different types of documentation out there. There's sort of conceptual documentation, which sort of gives you an idea about the thinking behind something. There's sort of tutorial, step-by-step guide to actually implementing something. And then there's reference, where strict reference or implementation sort of API guides would be similar to this if you've ever used, you know, like a Bootstrap or something like that. So there's some really good examples of great documentation out there. Ember.js does a great job. A lot of these you'll notice are development-based or programming-based. Bootstrap has amazing documentation. Foundation, Backbone, GitHub. Has anybody seen the GitHub style guide ever? It's really good. But most of these are sort of curated. They're at the they're curated references. And that's something that becomes an issue when you want to sort of have something that's easy to maintain. So I want to focus in on references for documenting UI. References or API documentation. So what should documentation be? It should be concise, descriptive, should be standard, and there should be easy to maintain. These are going to be the ones that you get with the tools that I'm actually going to show you right now. In the next couple slides. So UI documentation is hard because of a couple of things. A lot of times it requires context. You don't know whether you're in a mobile or desktop or tablet context. It's very hard to actually generate documentation for that unless it's curated again by hand. It also requires those visual cues. A lot of times, good UI documentation, it's great to have visual aids, pictures, videos, video tutorials. So this is very hard to do. It also requires multiple stakeholders. And what I mean by that is actually, when you look at UI, you need HTML, CSS, and JavaScript a lot of the times to actually implement UX and UI. So I want to talk about generators, because this is something that the programming community has been doing well for a long time. They've come up with ways to parse their code and generate documentation for themselves. So a good one, or a couple of good examples of this are like UI doc, ext docs, natural docs. I think that's for PHP. This PHP docs as well. Tom doc, which is for Ruby. Doco, which is for CoffeeScript. And they all do one thing really well. It's comment parsing. But in order to have comment parsing, you have to have some sort of standard of comments. So this is what a typical comment block looks in JavaScript. I just use that because it's my best frame of reference. So you can see that it's very descriptive. It tells you what parameters it should take, what it should return. This is sort of a standard that has sort of gone around in a long time. If you're writing good code, you're usually writing great documentation. And if you write this, one of those parsers can pick up all your code and actually be able to generate the documentation for you. So, well, what about the UI? That was all sort of programming-based, API-based, functional documentation. And more specifically, what about CSS? CSS has sort of been the Wild West for a long time. People have sort of done everything their own way. So what about CSS as far as this goes, as far as documentation? Has anybody heard of KSS?
Yeah.
Yeah? Good. You? Oh, sweet, man. Hey, you came to the right top. So KSS was built by a guy named Kyle Neath. He works at GitHub. Really smart guy. I like KSS, but it doesn't get me all the way there. It's a sweet Ruby gem that does do some parsing of your CSS or your less or your Sass. So that's kind of cool. This is what his style guide looks like. So if you want the parser to actually work, you have to sort of write your documents or write CSS like this, or your comments like this. This is actually, I think, a less version. So you can see it's doing the backslash with backslash for comments. And you'll note that he doesn't really have any at tags like parameters or anything to declare the different sort of pieces of the style guide compared to that other JavaScript comment block. So that's something I'll get into in a second. So you can actually go to warspire.com/KSS to check out an example. The one big problem with KSS right now is that it actually is a multi-step process. It doesn't actually build the documentation in one step. It's important to note that that's kind of like a really hard beginner's learning curve, like if you have to do multiple things to actually get a piece of software to work. So this is an example of WhyOutputs. So it looks pretty good. He's done a good job of actually framing it in such a way that abides by the sort of GitHub style guide. So there's some pros to this utility, to this tool. KSS dynamically generates an object. So it's sort of the tree of information for each comment in each section it creates. It also enforces structured commenting. So if you're working in a team and you have this one document that tells you how you should be commenting, it's great because everybody's on the same page and everybody knows what they should be doing. And this is something that's sort of being enforced in JavaScript for a long time, and everybody in CSS is sort of doing their own thing, which I think we should start to look and take some of those tips from the JavaScript community. Encourages documentation of states. So CSS, as you know, it's great now for doing different transitions, animations. So there's going to be a lot of different states, different classes that get added to different address that problem of context. And it also doesn't address the problem of inheritance. So styles can get inherit from their parents' styles. So that's the cons of KSS. Still great. So can we do better? I sort of went back and forth whether or not to showcase this. It's not really a showcase, but you guys will be the first people to see this outside of my company. And I'm only going to give you a little bit so that jQuery will have most of it. Right? Full disclosure, obviously, I'm like, big part of jQuery. So, long pause. Okay, can we do better? Can we do better? Okay, so this is DSS. Well, KSS was Kyle Nile style sheets, right? Called it after himself. I'm not calling it Darcy style sheets, it's documented style sheets, right? So I want something that's a little bit more global. I want something a little bit more robust. I want to work with the community here and at large. I'm a big open source proponent. I want to come up with a standard way that we comment our CSS. So this is the logo. It's got some revisions to do. But documented style sheets essentially will be, warning, it's a work in progress. It will be a documentation tool. It will be a style guide, similar to what I just showed you. And it will be a comment parser. So it will come with everything that you need to write or create documentation. It's also, that's not what I said. So the pros of actually doing this over KSS, which is the currently only tool I could find out there that currently does CSS documentation or generation, is it's a single step build process. So you just run a command, it gets built. It's flexible. The style guide that I'm proposing is flexible. It can be iterated upon. This is great if you've ever done anything in standards committees and bodies. It's really important that we can actually have some flexibility in a specification. Template support, so you can get customization where you want it, and it isn't just going to be generic. So you can have a hybrid model of sort of tailored documentation to generated documentation. And then it is a Grunt.js plugin. Does anybody use Grunt? One? Okay, I'm talking to you after. So Grunt.js, it's a task tool, so all you would have to do is install Grunt. And in each one of your projects, you can actually include DSS. And when you go to actually build your project, it will run all that documentation parsing, and it will actually create documentation for you. The cons of DSS. I'm going to tell you what's wrong with this. It still doesn't address the context issue. documentation at CSS level is very shallow. Right now, I'm not doing anything that sort of holds context and figures out where you are within scope of CSS. And it still doesn't address the inheritance problem that KSS has. But I'm working on it. We are working on it at our company. We're trying to come up with a way that we can provide this in a tool. So this is the first look at the style guide. Again, you'll notice it looks almost exactly like that JavaScript style guide. We've got a name, a description. We've got states, which are similar to KSS. They have states. They just automatically parse it. But this isn't rigid. Actually defining the state gives us some flexibility in where these parameters are put, whether or not you include them or not. And if we always maintain, right now the spec says that if there's always a markup at the bottom, you can have HTML examples or code blocks at the end of your comment. So this is great for examples in the documentation. So this is what it looks like right now. I do have a GitHub repo right now. If anybody wants to comment on that, make issues, talk to me afterwards about it and what I'm doing with it and the spec. And then, so it's Darcy Clarke, DSS is the repo right now. And I'm going to tell you more to be announced at JQuakeTO. So thank you. If you guys have any questions, do you have time for questions? Go.
Have you looked at all at addressing the issue of dependency management in tutorial style documentation, especially with large APIs? I find it's very common for it to go stale and nobody notices.
Yeah, so I looked at like a parent declaration. We've left it out right now until I can find a better way of like the inheritance and the context, because you might be able to, the parser might be able to do some of that work. But I did look very closely at adding a parent, and that would specify like another class or another name of a comment that you, or a piece of UI that you've commented. So eventually there will be something like that that will join together, like you say, dependencies or things that are parented, parents of child and nesting and all that stuff. So, cool. Go ahead.
For the inheritance thing, you can use Chrome or Firefox, the computed styles.
Yeah.
They've obviously, when they render it, they calculate that. Have you looked at digging into those plugins to figure out how they determine it?
Yeah, so that would require that we compile all the CSS, hold reference to where the comment blocks are, like the selectors, and then figuring that out. It's definitely something I'd be open to. That's probably the only way that we would figure that out. One of the biggest problems, though, too, is the HTML structure. Unless, like, that's probably the biggest one. The biggest hurdle is actually creating examples that somehow could be nested in each other. So at our company, we actually work on an SDK called Media Everywhere. And we have a ton of sort of views that get nested in each other, and those could change context, whether in tablet. Because they're adaptive, we can change sort of what that looks like. So
yeah, it's tough without rendering the whole page.
It's tough without rendering the whole app, right? So and then changing the context and then showing you. So we're working on that right now. We're having discussions about it.
I feel a modicum of your pain.
Yeah. Okay. So right now this works great for like shallow CSS. So you have a bunch of classes like a Bootstrap, Twitter Bootstrap. This is perfect for it because a lot of the styles are global, sort of. They aren't nested so much as that you could put a class on anything and it creates that button or it creates that piece of UI. So that's great for them. For us, when the context changes, the UI changes. So it's a little harder for us to figure that out right now. But anybody else?
Question?
Go.
Any impediments to using a documentation system like this with, say, less or Sass or anything along anything? Like CSS or?
Not that I know of. Like any issues with that?
I'm just curious if you've tried to find it.
Yeah, I mean, I've parsed things with it. I'm not.
Yeah, no, I mean.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good question. We, the one thing that I should know that it's a good question because you can actually extend CSS elements and with mixins. So that is another sort of context and inheritance issue that we're still trying to figure out, like how we go about grabbing those styles in and creating that, generating that documentation.
Cool. Thank you, Darcy.
No problem.
Make sure you check out Darcy's remainder of the talk, jQuery TO. And
hey, that's
someone
pretty
here,
good for, come on.
Someone here, that was really good.
Thank you.
And someone here is going to win a ticket to go there. Check it out.
That's definitely too small.